you've read the title of the video, so you know what's happening. Today, I'm going to be sharing, reviewing, and coloring in Ohuhu's very first coloring books. Ohuhu was kind enough to send me these 4 coloring books themselves, but I promise I'm going to be completely transparent with you in this video, and I did even consider not reviewing them on the channel since a couple of them fall within that simple and bold coloring genre, which usually isn't my style of coloring, but I know a lot of you enjoy that genre, so I wanted to share these books with you in case you're interested in adding them to your collection. And I also just thought it would be interesting to hear my thoughts and opinions as someone who's never colored a simple and bold coloring page in their life. So without further ado, let's just get into the video. As I mentioned, these are Ohuhu's very first coloring books, and they do have some really great features that make them stand out in comparison to your standard coloring book. First off, the pages are printed on double-sided bleed-proof paper. So you can use your Ohuhu markers without worrying about the alcohol marker ink bleeding through and ruining the illustration on the other side. Definitely a game changer for all you alcohol marker lovers out there. The paper is also 260 GSM, eco-friendly and acid-free, which helps preserve the vibrancy of your markers on the paper. Each book includes a little catalog at the front, which helps you browse through all the illustrations and figure out which page you want to color a lot more easily. And as you can see, the books are spiral bound at the top and each page is perforated. This is a really great feature because it means you can color flat on your desk without the binding getting in the way whether you're left or right-handed. Plus, the perforation does mean that you have the opportunity to rip the pages out if you like, to gift or display in your home. However, since the pages are double-sided, removing one will mean that you lose the illustration on the back. Now, there are a few things that I'd keep in mind if you're thinking of picking up one of these books for yourselves. Firstly, the paper has a very smooth, almost glossy-like finish to it, which I'm assuming is what helps make it bleed proof. And whilst that's great for markers, it does mean that colored pencils don't really perform well on this paper. In fact, the product description specifically states that these books are designed for alcohol markers, water-based markers, and acrylic markers. So if you're primarily a pencil colorist, these books might not be the best fit for you. Secondly, I couldn't find any information about whether these illustrations were hand-drawn, digitally drawn, or who the artists are. It is possible that they could be AI assisted, but given the cohesive illustration style across each book, my strongest guess is that Ohuhu just used their in-house artists. So in the future, it would be great if Ohuhu disclosed that information or even collaborated with known artists in the coloring space. So let's move on to flipping through these 4 different books. Each one has its own unique theme and vibe, and one in particular I am mildly obsessed with, but I'm going to be annoying and save my favorite to last. For now, let's start off with My Simple Pleasure. This book is exactly what the name suggests and fits squarely into that simple and bold coloring genre. Inside, you'll find a really fun mix of cartoony characters, animals, florals, food, and even some mandalas at the back. It also has the thickest line work out of the 4 books. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of thick line work in my coloring pages, but I know a lot of you out there exclusively color with alcohol markers, and thick lines can really help prevent the ink from bleeding outside the edges. The paper is bleed proof though, so that shouldn't be an issue anyway, but that extra line weight does add some peace of mind. From my perspective, I'd recommend this book to colorists who enjoy large open spaces for blending, testing out different textures, or experimenting with effects with their alcohol markers. It's also great for anyone who's looking for a more mindless and casual coloring session, either as a palette cleanser between more detailed pages, or just because you genuinely enjoy that simple and bold style on a larger scale. Which, speaking of, that is a really nice feature about these books. These are a lot larger than your typical Amazon printed coloring book. Each page is around 8 by 10 inches, so you do have a lot of room to play with. So next door has just decided to do some loud gardening work. Hopefully you can't hear it too much, but for each of the books I'm reviewing in this video, I did want to share my top 3 uncolored pages in each. So first up, in my simple pleasure, is the illustration featured on the cover. I really like this one because there's a lot of opportunity for experimenting with different alcohol marker textures. You've got grass that you could add texture for, a stone pathway, a wooden door. There are so many elements that make this page a great opportunity for technical practice. Second is this super cute Christmassy winter scene. I can't lie, I'm always a sucker for a bit of a festive coloring page. Christmas illustrations just always make my little colorist heart happy. And again, there's so much room here for playing around with texture. You'll hear me mention alcohol marker effects and textures a lot in this video because that is a massive factor for me when choosing a page. I want to be able to apply and practice fun details and techniques. And finally, I chose this adorable and quaint little basket of flowers. I've always enjoyed coloring florals, and if I were to tackle this page, I definitely try to create a wicker texture on the basket. I have no idea if I'd be able to pull it off successfully, but I would give it a try. The next book we're going to chat about is Enjoy the Sweet Moment. As the title and cover illustration suggests, the artwork in this book is mainly focused on sweet treats, though there are a few savory meals sprinkled in there as well. You've got cakes, ice creams, waffles, pancakes, pastries, etc. You've got the whole shebang. And in terms of complexity, there is actually a nice mix. Some pages are on the simpler side, similar to the pages in My Simple Pleasure. Yes, that's the title of the book. But there are also more detailed illustrations throughout, which gives you a good variety depending on your mood or energy level during your coloring sessions. And on top of that, the line work does tend to vary as well from page to page and sometimes within the same illustration. Now, if you're thinking about picking this book up, you definitely need to be a fan of coloring food and mostly sweet food at that. Unfortunately, food illustrations have never really been my thing. I don't know why, it's just something I'm not really drawn to as a colorist. Nevertheless, if I were to color a page from this book, these are the 3 options I would be most drawn towards. First up is what I think is a stack of pancakes. It could also be some sort of layered cake, but I'm thinking it's more an elaborate pancake stack. You could definitely color this page as is, but if I were to take it on, I would want to have a go at adding some sort of background. Maybe a fun wallpaper style pattern, or even make it look like the plate is sitting on a breakfast table, complete with a cute tablecloth and some more breakfast goodies in the background. Next is this ice cream cone. Even though I'm not a huge fan of coloring food in general, I do make an exception for ice cream every now and then, mostly because it's my favorite dessert in real life. This one actually looks like a lot of fun to color, especially if you want to create some fun multicolored swirls within the soft serve aspect and having a go at creating a semi-realistic waffle cone texture. That would be a fun challenge. And finally, there's this bowl of fruit and other goodies. You could totally interpret this as a fruit sundae, but to me it has a really strong tropical vibe, so I'd be more inclined to color it like an acai bowl. And I think a water splash background would pair really nicely with the wavy elements at the bottom of the illustration, though those elements are confusing me slightly as well. I'm not completely sure what's happening there. But let's move on to book number 3, which ended up pleasantly surprising me, and that is Mandala and Animals. When I first read the title, I assumed the book would include animal illustrations and mandala illustrations separately. I personally really enjoy coloring animals, but mandalas have never really been my thing. So I was feeling a bit unsure about whether I would like this book before my initial flip through, but like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. The illustrations aren't focused on mandalas in the traditional sense. Instead, they incorporate the mandala style patterns within the animal shapes themselves. It actually feels more like a Zendoodle style coloring book to me, kind of like a simplified version of a Millie Marotta or Lolita Aya coloring book. And what surprised me even more was that I was genuinely drawn to quite a few of the pages in this book, even though Zendoodle style illustrations, I don't know, have never been my go-to. I think this book is a great stepping stone into the Zendoodle genre, especially if you've been curious about it, but don't want to go full into it straight away. So yeah, I'm definitely keen to give one of these pages a go in the future, especially since it's so different to anything I've colored before. So the first page I'm most drawn to in this book is this gorgeous butterfly. I've always been a sucker for a beautiful butterfly illustration. There's just something about the symmetry that I find really pleasing to the eye, and this one is no exception. It also has a slightly magical and mystical vibe to it, and it's totally up my alley. The second page on my radar isn't too Zendoodly, and I'm kind of shocked that I'm drawn to it because I'm actually a little bit terrified of birds in real life. But I had to include it in my top 3 because there's so much opportunity to have fun with colour on this page. Between the parrots, the flowers, and the background, I definitely go bold and bright and saturated to really make this page pop. And finally is this unicorn illustration. This one definitely has the most mandala / Zendoodle elements incorporated into the line work, which would make it a bit of a challenge for me. But again, I can see myself really enjoying the coloring process, especially when it comes to the unicorn's hair. I'm picturing a rainbow pastel vibe and would maybe even experiment with some glittery accents to highlight the smaller mandala-like details. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to save my favorite out of the 4 coloring books until last, and so here it is, Portraits of Joy. As a lot of you know, I've started to dip my toes into coloring portraits. You can see my first attempts in these 2 videos here. And I particularly enjoyed my experience of coloring a portrait with alcohol markers. So when I found out that one of Ohuhu's new coloring books was focused on portraits, I was definitely excited, and fortunately, it didn't disappoint. The illustration style in this book is more cartoony than the portraits I've colored so far, but I think that personally makes them feel more approachable to me. Plus, there are quite a good amount of magical and fantasy-themed portraits in this book, and that is my absolute favorite kind of subject matter to color. And you'll definitely see that reflected shortly in my top 3 favorite pages in this book. In saying that though, I could honestly see myself coloring every page in this book. It's another one of those times where I can't explicitly put my finger on why I'm so drawn to the pages. I just look at each uncolored page and immediately start imagining all the different ways it could be brought to life. And to me, that's what makes a coloring page or coloring book truly great. It's when it can get my creative juices flowing from the get-go. So yes, because I like so many pages in this book, it was difficult to choose my top 3, but I think I have managed to whittle it down. First up is this portrait that's giving me all the spooky, mystical vibes. For this page, I'd love to attempt some sort of galaxy effect with my alcohol markers, either in the background sky or even on the hoodie / I don't know, maybe it's a cloak that this character is wearing. I think that would be such a fun and slightly challenging way to enhance the magical energy this illustration is giving off. The second page is another spooky, magical illustration that would be perfect for the Halloween season. What I'd really love to try here is creating a glowing effect for the jack-o'-lanterns. Like, I don't know, like they're magically enchanted and casting light on the witch in the background. Then I think I'd color the witch herself in a dark monochromatic palette to really emphasize that contrast and mood. Then the final page I'm most excited to color is this really unusual scene featuring this female presenting character inside a jar. And I think it is that unique and unexpected concept that's drawing me to this page. It almost gives me the vibe of peering inside a crystal ball and seeing a scene playing out in another realm, except obviously it's a jar, not a crystal ball. So when I do get around to coloring this one, I'd love to experiment with some reflective glass effects to really sell that look and feel of the jar itself. Alright, now that we've flipped through all the books and chatted about them, it's time to put them to the test with some alcohol markers. I've decided I want to colour this page here first, the one I just talked about in Portraits of Joy, and we're going to see how this bleed-proof paper really holds up. So as you'll see, I did try going with a bit of a galaxy pattern for the character's outfit on this page. In all honesty, it turned out looking more tie-dye than galaxy, but even though it didn't match my original intention exactly, I was still really happy with the final result. I also want to give a quick shout out to this image from the Amazon product listing. It definitely came in handy at multiple points in my colouring process when I was struggling with the shadow placement. But what I mainly wanted to talk about while you watch me colour a few sections of this page is my experience using the alcohol markers on this bleed-proof paper. Overall, it was a positive experience, but there was more of a learning curve than I expected. The last portrait I coloured with alcohol markers was on the Strathmore Bristol vellum paper, and I quickly realised that markers behave very differently on that paper compared to the Ohuhu colouring books. This Ohuhu marker paper has a special coating to make it bleed proof, meaning the ink doesn't absorb into the page or bleed through to the other side. That is great for double-sided designs, but it also means the ink stays on the surface and evaporates much faster, so you have to work really quickly. Whereas on the Strathmore paper, which has more tooth and absorbency, I could layer and blend at a much more relaxed pace, giving me smoother transitions. That wasn't the case here. I had to let go of my usual heavy layering technique because the more layers I added, the more I disturbed the base layer rather than blending it. What worked best was minimal layering and working in small sections, accepting that I wouldn't get ultra smooth blends, and that's totally okay. I shifted my mindset from aiming for seamless gradients to embracing a chunkier, more cartoony style blend, which kind of suits this illustration style more anyway. So if you do decide to pick up any of these colouring books, just keep in mind that your alcohol markers will behave a bit differently on this paper, and you might need to tweak your technique accordingly. Now, because I'm such a big fan of experimenting in my colouring books, I decided to test out a water-soluble medium on this paper, Neocolor 2s, to see how it would all hold up. And surprisingly, they worked relatively well. The pigment did seem a little less saturated than usual, but I think that's partly because I was erring on the side of caution. I wanted to keep my layers fairly light and didn't go in with too much water, just in case the paper didn't take it well. The page did end up warping ever so slightly, which I'll show you at the end, but for the most part, I'd call my Neocolor 2 and bleed-proof paper experiment a success. It definitely gave me more confidence to try other water-soluble mediums in these books down the track. To finish off the page, I reached for my Ohuhu acrylic markers to add some final highlights and details. Now normally I'd go for a white acrylic marker to add highlights, but this time I decided to try something different. I used a light pink instead, and I absolutely loved how it looked. I've seen this technique popping up more and more on Instagram and Pinterest lately, and I think it adds such a playful, whimsical touch to a completed page. I still used my white acrylic marker for the sparkly accents on the outfit and a few of the finer highlights here and there, but the soft pink gave the whole piece a warmer and slightly dreamier feel, which I really liked. That said, I did make one misstep. I tried to add some pink acrylic highlights to the parting of the character's hair, and it looked so bad. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd ruined the entire page, but I ended up going off camera, coloring over it with alcohol markers, and thankfully, it totally fixed it. That section does have a bit of a sheen now where the acrylic is layered underneath, but honestly, I do not mind. It's barely noticeable unless you're looking for it, and most importantly, those awkward highlights are gone. So this is how the finished page turned out, and I'm really happy with it. Once I adjusted my approach and got into the rhythm of how this bleed-proof paper responds to alcohol markers, I had a great time. So if you're planning to colour in these Ohuhu books, just keep in mind that your usual techniques might need a little tweaking depending on the medium you're using. And as you can see here, we had zero bleed through to the other side. Love to see it. Oh, and here's a quick look at the slight warping I mentioned earlier from using water. It's really minimal, and I think it'll flatten out pretty quickly over time. Definitely let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me colour more pages from these books in future videos. So there you have it, everyone. Those are my honest first thoughts and opinions on Ohuhu's very first colouring books. As I mentioned at the beginning, the only thing I would love to see improved is some credit to the artists who contributed to these illustrations. Even if those credits are just listed on the Ohuhu website, I do think it's important to acknowledge the creatives who are behind this artwork. But apart from that, I am genuinely excited to keep colouring in these books. However, if you would like to pick up any of these books for yourself, I do have a 10% discount code linked in the description below. It's not an affiliate code, I don't make any commission from it, it's just a little special discount for my subscribers if you want to save on any product on the Ohuhu website. But until next time, happy colouring, friends. Have a good day, have a good life, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!